Guys, welcome to Global Military Now, your ultimate source for global defense updates, real military strategies, and world power analysis. For centuries, Russia's greatest weapon has been the winter that crushed Napoleon and Hitler, which is why at 2:47 a.m., when a Russian operator saw flickering blips on his radar, he chalked them up to snow squalls forming over the Volga, completely unaware they were Ukrainian Ludi drones screaming towards their target. The drones weren't fighting the brutal 40 fast crosswinds. They were exploiting them using the turbulent air as an invisible highway. Each drone was a guided kamikaze carrying a 130 lb C4 payload aimed at the heart of the Volga power grid. The plan for this strike had been meticulously crafted over the past 2 weeks, targeting the Veshka substation, a 200 million steel heart pumping 2.4 million kilowatts into central Russia. To Russian commanders, it was invincible, protected by 710 mm of airspace and the historical certainty that winter was their fortress. That arrogance created the perfect vulnerability. During those 2 weeks, Ukrainian intelligence analyzed satellite data and found a stunning weakness. The bitter cold itself made the substation's massive transmission lines critically brittle, but that discovery only presented an impossible equation. The drones would have to fly 700 meters through a wall of air defenses directly into the teeth of the very winter storm Russia believed was its ultimate shield. So, the question wasn't just how they could survive the journey, it was how do you turn your enemy's greatest weapon against them? At 11:47 p.m., 5 Labodi drones lifted off from Ukraine. Their fuel gauges showed a maximum range of 60-20 mi. Their target was 710 mi away. The math was brutal and unforgiving. They were destined to fall out of the sky long before reaching their objective. Their first test was the border itself. They plunged to just 80 FD, hugging the frozen earth to stay below the razor's edge of Russian radar. Once across, the lead drone began to exhale a fine mist of aerosol. This was the opening move of the Window-Weaver cascade. It was like a pack of wolves pulling a single sheep's skin over themselves, transforming 5 distinct high-threat targets into one single harmless cloud drifting on Russian radar screens. But the fuel clock was still ticking down faster than the miles. It looked like they would fall short until the AI made its move. It stopped fighting the brutal 35-mile F crosswinds and instead began to treat them like an opponent in a martial art. With thousands of micro adjustments to its wings, the drone used the wind's own power to push itself forward. The effect was stunning. Fuel efficiency skyrocketed by 30%. The impossible 7 and 10-mile journey was now within their grasp. For 2 hours, the strategy worked. The ghost cloud drifted deeper into Russia, but silence on a radar screen can mean two things. Either your enemy is sleeping or they are watching and letting you walk right into their trap. At 1:47 a.m., the ghost cloud had drifted 200 meters deeper into Russia. The illusion was flawless. The Ukrainian operators watched their fuel projections hold steady, their stealth appearing to work perfectly. The problem was Russia had a weapon built specifically for hunting ghosts, the Nebo M radar. Most modern radars are like a sniper's scope, incredibly precise but narrow in focus. They can be fooled. The Nebo M, however, is like a giant floodlight. It bathes hundreds of miles of sky in low-frequency waves, sacrificing precision for raw detection power. It couldn't see the individual drones, but it could see a 2 m-wide cloud of aerosol particles that had no business being there. Inside a concrete bunker near Samra, an operator watched the massive, slow-moving anomaly crawl across his screen. He couldn't get a clear target lock, but he didn't need one. He relayed the general coordinates to a Panzer S-1 air defense battery 12 mi away with a single command: investigate. A 50-76 missile tore through the night sky at Mach 3. It didn't target a single drone. It targeted the center of the aerosol cloud. The warhead detonated in a flash of blinding white, unleashing a storm of tungsten shrapnel that ripped the ghost cloud to shreds. One of the drones flying on the wing was shredded instantly. First blood had been drawn. The aerosol cloak was gone. Four drones were now flying completely exposed in hostile airspace. And for the first time that night, the Russians knew with absolute certainty they were being hunted. At 01:38 a.m., the shrapnel from the first missile had done more than just destroy one drone. It had ripped away their invisibility cloak. On the Panzer operator's screen, the single hazy anomaly was gone. In its place, four hard, clear targets were screaming towards him. The operator locked onto the lead drone. A missile launch was now imminent. But the Ukrainian AI had been waiting for this exact moment. Instead of deploying flares or jamming, it executed the true core of the Window Weaver cascade. The four drones banked hard in perfect unison, turning 90 degrees to fly perpendicular to the incoming radar beam. To the Russian crew, this was a completely illogical move, seemingly presenting an even bigger target. It was, however, a brilliant trap rooted in physics. The Panzer's Doppler radar is designed to track objects moving towards or away from it at high speed. It's programmed to automatically filter out signals that are relatively stationary, dismissing them as ground clutter, trees, hills, buildings. By flying perfectly sideways to the radar's line of sight, the drone's velocity relative to the radar dropped to almost zero. It's the difference between trying to track a baseball flying straight at your face versus one moving horizontally across the horizon a mile away. The effect was instantaneous on the Russian operator's screen. The four solid target locks vanished. The multi-million-dollar targeting computer moments away from launching another missile was now being told by its own sensors that the targets no longer existed. They had simply blended back into the electronic noise of the landscape. The Russian operator stared in disbelief. His system had been tricked by a simple law of physics. The Ukrainians had survived the immediate threat, but in doing so, they had revealed their hand. The Russians now knew they were facing a sophisticated, coordinated enemy, and their response was about to escalate dramatically. At 01:51 a.m., the Russian ground crew stared at their blank radar screens in fury and disbelief. They had been outsmarted, but the drone's brilliant maneuver had just made one fatal miscalculation. It assumed they were only fighting the men in the bunker. The bunker commander grabbed a secure radio. He was demanding an asset that could render the drone's low-altitude tactics completely useless. 90 seconds later, 250 miles away, a Berv A-50 AWACS plane received new orders. This was a flying command post, a monster that could see everything, flying at 30,000 feet. The A-50's powerful look-down radar was immune to the drone's terrain-hugging flight path. More importantly, it wasn't just looking for radar returns. Its thermal sensors scanned the freezing landscape below and against the black frozen earth. The 200-degree heat from the drone's small engines glowed like four burning cigars in a dark room. The A-50 didn't need to fire a single shot. It simply transmitted the drone's precise thermal coordinates directly back to the Panzer battery on the ground. Inside the Ukrainian control room, a new, more terrifying alarm shrieked to life. This wasn't a paint warning from a searching radar. This was a hard lock. A missile was in the air, and this time it was locked onto the heat signature of the lead drone, Pathfinder. The physics trick wouldn't work again. You can fool a Doppler radar, but you can't hide heat from an infrared seeker. The missile closed the distance at over 2,000 miles. The survival of the entire mission now depended on the lead drone, which had just been handed a death sentence. At 01:52 a.m., the drone had one final desperate gamble left to play. It activated Winter Ghost mode. A small pod was ejected from the drone's underbelly. This wasn't a standard blazing hot magnesium flare. That would be too obvious for a modern missile sophisticated seeker. This was something far more clever. Inside the pod, a chemical compound ignited, engineered to burn at precisely 200 degrees F, the exact thermal signature of the Ludi's own engine. It created a perfect thermal ghost, an identical twin in the eyes of the missile. Simultaneously, the drone's AI performed two actions at once. It chopped the engine's throttle, dropping its own heat signature below the missile's detection threshold, and executed a sharp, unpowered dive. For a few critical seconds, the drone became a glider, using the fierce Volga wind to push it silently towards the dark earth. The missile seeker, now screaming towards its target, saw two identical heat signatures. It had to make a choice. It had a 50-50 chance. It chose wrong. The missile slammed into the decoy pod, exploding in a brilliant flash of shrapnel that tore through the night sky. Miles below the Russian ground crew likely cheered, believing they had scored a kill. They couldn't have been more mistaken. 2 seconds later, Pathfinder reignited its engine and climbed back to altitude. The A-50 crew watched in stunned silence as their target simply reappeared on their screens, having risen like a phantom from the grave. They had just been checkmated. Every layer of Russian defense had been peeled back. Every trick and countermeasure had failed. The road to Veskima was now completely terrifyingly open. At 2:47 a.m., the final of command from Kiev was a single word: engage. The chess match was over. The four remaining drones, now unopposed, converged on their targets, the massive 500 kilovolt transmission lines of the Veshkima substation. This wasn't a saturation attack. It was synchronized assassination. In perfect unison, the drones slammed into the power lines, releasing their combined 600-la payload of C4. Each shaped charge was aimed with mathematical precision at the junction points where the thick cables met the main support pylons. The warheads didn't detonate on impact. The fuses were set with a 0.8-second delay. This wasn't a flaw. It was the most brilliant part of the plan. At 0 degrees Fahrenheit, steel doesn't bend or stretch. It shatters. The explosion wasn't just hitting a metal cable. It was hitting a structure with the integrity of frozen glass. The delayed blast, timed at 0.8 seconds, detonated inside the pylon joints, trapping the shock wave to shatter the frozen steel like a hammer on glass. The massive pylons didn't just bend, they shattered. The 500 kilovolt lines, thick as a baseball bat, snapped like dry twigs. There was no massive lingering fire. There was just a sudden deafening silence on the grid, 500 megas of power gone in the blink of an eye. The moment the Lu-TI drones connected with the 500 kilovolt lines, it was like someone yanked the power cord on the entire Volga region during the World Cup final. Videos flooding Telegram showed two blinding flashes. Flames shot 30 feet into the air, burning until 700 a.m., while Russian firefighters scrambled like a SWAT team in a bad action movie. The Veshkima substation, the energy heart of the region, lost 500 megawatts instantly. That's enough to black out 400 Zalos in Russian homes. Hundreds of thousands in Julian, Cordovia, and Chevash were left in the freezing dark. Russia desperately tried to lock down the scene while sirens wailed, but everyone knew this was a catastrophe. 6 hours later, Starlink satellite imagery confirmed that a 20-foot wide crater and high-voltage lines snapped like toothpicks. Russia claimed the situation was under control, right? Under control, like trying to fix your modem by hitting it with a hammer. But this wasn't just about burning scrap metal. This was the moment Ukraine snapped its fingers and the entire Russian war machine stalled out like a car running out of gas on the highway. When you zoom out from the smoldering crater, you see the